The time has come for my people to go.
I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's what the people demand, and we gonna keep fighting till we get that land. I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's time to rise, to get what we want, we got to organize.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Pantsula Podcast, brought to you by the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. For those of you who are not familiar with the A-APRP, we are a Pan-Africanist party based in Africa. Our objective is the total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism. Once again, that's the total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism. That is how we define Pan-Africanism. That definition of Pan-Africanism was brought to us by the Fifth Pan-African Congress that was spearheaded by the likes of the first president of Ghana, Kwame Ture, and the likes of W.B. Du Bois, George Padmore, Aimee Garvey, and many others. So today, our episode will be on principled struggle. But before we start our episode, like each and every episode, for those of you who are familiar with us, we would like to start off with paying homage to our ancestors. So with that being said, I'll pass it over to my comrade Jesse, who's going to highlight our two ancestors who we are dedicating this episode to.
Yes, blessings everybody. So the two ancestors we are honoring today would be first Henry Sylvester Williams, who was a Trinidadian lawyer, activist, counselor, and writer, who was one of the founders of the Pan-African movement. Williams organized the first Pan-African conference held in Westminster Town Hall in London. And in 1903, he went to practice as a barrister in Southern Africa, becoming the first African to be called to the bar in the Cape Colony. In 1908, he returned to Trinidad, where he rejoined the bar and practiced until his passing 4 years later. And the second ancestor we're honoring today is Marie Gisele Aimee and this name is a beautiful name, and I was working on it, but I'm gonna get it. Rabesahla, who was a Malgalese politician and activist, who was the first woman to hold a ministerial position in the government of Madagascar. She entered politics at the age of 17, campaigning on the behalf of political prisoners and becoming Madagascar's first woman municipal councillor before becoming the first Malgalese woman to establish and lead a political party. A committed Marxist and co-founder of the Communist Congress Party for the Independence of Madagascar, which took power in 1975. In 1977, she became Madagascar's first female minister responsible for promoting revolutionary art and culture, but lost her job in 1991 when her ministry was abolished in the course of Madagascar's return to a multi-party democracy. She remained an active political campaigner and journalist until her passing in 2011. So yes, those are the two ancestors we honor always. We thank the ancestors for their contributions. You know, when I have to, and all of our comrades in doing these episodes, we're having to look for ancestors because, you know, the capitalist system is not talking about people like Henry Sylvester Williams and Marie Gisele, but looking information up online and just reading books about people who have committed their work to the struggle always inspires me to just do it consistently, because these are the people who we truly honor, because they've done the work before, and that's why we're able to do it. So yes, we honor those ancestors today. Ashe.
Without their work, you know, we wouldn't be who we are. So definitely much respect to those ancestors. So once again, this episode is centered around principled struggle. I know a lot of people may not know what that is, what that means, and hence why we're going to highlight, what it entails, so forth and so on, because I think it's very important, especially in doing political work, or I think just in everyday life, for us to engage in principled struggle. So with that being said, I would kick it off by asking, what does being principled essentially mean? Probably just go around, like, what do we define as being principled?
So in thinking about this, I really was thinking about just folks that I've seen in my life who I recognize as principled. And I think of folks who are like just faithful to their word, consistent, someone who has a moral guard, like they care about things. It's not just like carelessness. there's a standard that is met. So I think being principled is simply meeting the standard of doing the work that is consistent. Like you're not gonna waver. You're not gonna, even when you are tempted to be inspired by the outer forces of just reality that make it seem as if you could just let things go and, be liberal about matters or not really take it seriously, not look at it head on. The difference in being principled is that it keeps you in the regard of knowing there's no wavering. It's like, this is what I am. And it's found in a formulation, it's found in a history, it's found in a history, it's found in something that is beyond the outside forces telling you like, oh, you don't need to be serious about that. Like, why are you so serious about that? But if you principle, it's like you're serious about it because it means something and you understand it means something. You're not going to waver.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's just, I interpret it as kind of the same sentiments you just said, but also, just belief system. So like, you stick to that belief system. Like, these are the things I believe in, and I wholeheartedly stand on, and I'm gonna stand firm on that ground, right? So for instance, like if I believe in the liberation of all of humanity, of all oppressed people, can't then be championing U.S. imperialist lines, right? Because they are the ones subjugating the rest of the world, and those oppressed people. If I say I'm for oppressed people, I can't say I'm against Nazism and be for Ukraine, because the Azov Battalion and all these neo-Nazi parties that these aren't just like parties that exist in the society, because there's plenty of them throughout various parts of Europe and other places. But when we talk about governmental power, military power, like they're integrated in those forces. So we can't separate the two. So I think that's an antagonistic contradiction. So I think once you are championing things that are against your principles, you deviate from that principle. So at that point, that really doesn't mean anything. So you have no ground to stand on. So yeah, I think
exactly it goes to the notion where it's that you walk what you talk. Like, you're not, if you say you're for something, then you have to demonstrate that by action. It reminds me of something that Kwame Ture said, like, oh, you say you're for your people, but what are you doing? Because it's one thing to acknowledge the problem, it's another thing to do something about the problem. So I think the principled aspect says, okay, it makes it a streamline, like you are doing something about what you see. You're not just seeing it and hiding from it, you're acknowledging it, and you're taking action consistently. Yeah. You're not saying, I was there. It's like, I'm still here, because it's still a problem. You're recognizing the changes in the problem, because the problem is, it's like, we know everything changes. So you're not gonna, and then that's the difference. I mean, the difference between principles and methods. And we could talk about that too. Principles versus methods, because those two things are different. But
no, for sure. Yeah, and I think sometimes that gets conflated, like, when it comes even to the aspect of nonviolence and violence or whatever. When we talk about revolutionary struggle and liberation, right? It's like, those are tactics, those are methods that you can use to attain your objectives. Because as I outlined in our intro, is that we understand as the All-African People's Revolutionary Party that the definition of Pan-Africanism is the total liberation, unification of African and scientific socialism. And we understand too that may engage, that will call for revolutionary armed struggle. Now, if there's certain specific instances where it doesn't call for that, or that's not needed, of course we will engage that, because we understand that's a method to get to that total unification and liberation of Africa, right? So, with that being said, that's not us. Some people will be like, oh, well, you went against your principles. Like, no, that's a method. That is a method. Now, if as a socialist party, revolutionary socialist party, if we started, getting, or independent party too, on top of that, started getting funding from capitalist structures and, or vying for the Democratic and Republican Party, I think in a way that will be us deviating from principles, essentially, because we want revolution. We don't want to maintain a plantation. That is not our ideology. That is not our principles. And then for those who want to understand the aspects of our ideology, which in my understanding encompasses our principles, I will put the link in the bio that outlines some of, like, collectivism, humanitarianism, egalitarianism, so forth and so on as well. That's in our that's
The
a part
Handbook
of
of
our ideology.
Revolutionary Warfare. I mean, read that. Like that
Exactly.
gives you an
Yeah.
outline of what this party is about and what our work is about. So yeah, I mean, to your point, it's like if you're principled, you're not just going to, we're aiming for, we have an objective. Our objective response to our ideology, and there are different methods that we can go about doing that, but we're not going to waver on our objective. We might waver on our methods. And as you said, if we got to get violent, okay, by any means necessary, right? I mean, it's kind of what Malcolm X said, like, at what extent are you going to get your freedom? Like, if you say you want it, then you must understand all that comes with that. And that does mean risk. I mean, it's not to say that this is easy work. I mean, I do think that should be outlined too, because the system has also trained us into thinking that, oh, if you get into this work, you know what they're gonna do? They're gonna come after you. They're gonna do what they did to Malcolm X. They're gonna do what they did to Martin Luther King. And and that's why they make those public assassinations, even like Fred Hampton Jr., like dragging his body out in the street, like, yo, look at what we're doing to leaders who attempt to go against this system. But I think that presses on us to just be more organized and to understand why we have to be more principled now, because of the reformism and people thinking that, oh, if we shake hands with capitalism, we can get a deal. It's like, we can't. We gotta be more radical in our analysis. And that is a principled struggle, because as we know, it's a lot of reactionary stuff, especially online. It comes to how people engage in conversations that are very important. People, instead of being principled, it's sort of just like a lot of talking points, a lot of just big language words and retweets, but there's no real action being called. So
I would say to that point too, when you're talking about, the whole thing about them making examples out of our historical figures or revolutionary figures who attempted to shake off the, the shackles of colonialism, neo-colonialism, saying, hey, don't try this or whatever. One thing for me personally that that helps me deal with that is two things. One, me being Muslim, because a part of the religion is highly talked about is martyrdom, is like fighting for a just cause, for God's cause, what we would deem like Allah's cause. So it says in the Quran throughout there that fight against injustice and oppression wherever you find it. Just always struggle against that. So if you die in the sake of that, that is dying for God's cause. So you're gonna, you're gonna reach heaven for doing that. So it says it explicitly. And then two, reading Hugh P. Newton's Revolutionary Suicide, it's like understanding engaging in revolutionary work is understanding that at some point you could face that ultimate demise, but in a way you're kind of, you can either go out two ways, either reactionary suicide or revolutionary suicide. You could go out, you could go out like a sucker in my eyes.
Right, a sucker.
Like a sucker and, try to capitulate and, tap dance your way around and everything's good, boss. Thanks, boss. Like you know what I mean? Or you could go out like Malcolm. You could go out, like all these revolutionary figures that you just highlighted, Fred Hampton, Garvey, so forth and so on. So it's up to you how you choose how you wanna go out, right? So that's how I look at it for me, for sure.
That's a really good way of stating it, because it's like you can go out two ways. You could be reactionary, and we see how the reactionary side, that's the easy side, right? That's the side that is prompted to us. It's the status quo. It's like, yo, don't be involved in that. Just get your bread, get your bag, right? Like, don't focus on the issues. But as we know, with everything being political, you can't just blank. I mean, if you blank out, if you say, well, I'm not going to be involved in this, and it's better for you to just say, all right, I'm a sucker, right? But don't say, but when something happens, right? If there's a police brutality situation, if there's some, attack on our people in some major way, don't get angry. Don't be surprised. Don't come with that, all of that fuel if you don't have any action behind it. Like, you understand the reality. It's like what George Jackson said, like, settle your quarrels, come together, understand the reality of our situation. Understand that fascism is already here, that people are already dying who could be saved. Like, people already are. It's not like when these incidents happen of any thing that capitalism offers, like, it's a new thing. Like, especially as, when we do this work, when we study history, we see capitalism has always, since its conception, been violent. It's always disenfranchised the masses. So the more we read about it and we understand the way it's able to just inflict violence, that's what prompts also the love, right? And I just like how you brought up the martyrdom aspect in a religion, because that's a beautiful cause to say, yeah, well, if you're going to kill me, I'm dying for the thing that is justice. I'm dying for the cause of good. I'm not dying as someone just to see, because we all, when we see violence, like, what do? Do you turn your head? Like, what's your responsibility to the call? And we got to do what must be done and discover our humanity. And, the love is what's really causing us to do this work, because I don't like to see people afflicted and in pain and starving and without houses, without food, without proper health care or attention to their needs emotionally. And I think a lot of us, we recognize the problem, but, with the system giving us this notion that we can't do nothing but just settle within our own selves to be individualistic as opposed to thinking in groups and collectives, I think we just become more and more, especially if you're internalizing all of that. And that's what they're prompting up everywhere, like social media, TV. That's the message. Like, you can't do nothing about it because things are just the way they are. So yeah, it does highlight the necessity for us to just really engage in the struggle, because we already see what's going to happen if we don't. If they're engaged, the system is engaged with us. They're definitely in charge of how we process reality. So we have to counter that.
I think every capacity and every way we can, we have to struggle against it. But I guess that will lead me into the second question, and what does it mean essentially to engage in principled struggle? And I guess what else, what does it entail to do so?
I would say engaging in principled struggle means, again, acknowledging the problem and not just being liberal about it, combating just this notion of turning your eyes and accepting things as they are presented, like getting to the root of the problem, essentially. Mm-hmm. And it entails, having a political education is necessary to facilitate that process, but also obviously joining an organization. And when dealing with reactionary folks online, working on ways of bringing up that conversation in a principled way, I would say it's not something that you would do reactionary. Like, you send them a message, if you don't engage the person directly and you're just making it to where people can see it, and it's just this public spectacle that does damage to what you're doing, because then it's no longer about the issue. Exactly. So I think if you're really trying to engage something principally, it entails really being focused on what the issue is, not making personal attacks, because we're all attacked by the system. So somebody could get it wrong. We can get it wrong. We often get it wrong. That's the whole thing. Like, you're not going to get it right all the time. So ask for clarification and then present an argument or present what you think needs to be corrected, and do that in a way where it services the reality of the situation. Because if you're not doing that and you're just like, oh, you out here showing yourself and you calling people names and getting into personal attacks and making it seem as if everyone has to agree, because we're not going to also agree on everything too. Like, we can waver in our agreement, but we need to understand what we're really dealing with. So you got to talk about it. You got to break it down. Basically, you got to break it down, and you can't just be reactionary. You got to be personal.
Yeah, and that's a good point to bring up in relation to not attacking the person. So, I think a lot of times when we engage in struggle, or certain people engage in struggle, it could sometimes lead, especially online, and doing it on timelines and feeds and stuff like that, is people can get really into personal issues because they feel personally hurt, instead of understanding that this is a battle of ideas. Like, principles are a set of beliefs, right? Like, you could change your principles, not saying that, one should always do that, or it's a good or bad thing. Well, it depends on what you're changing the principle to. But, people could change your principles, right? But I would say that, yeah, that's just you attacking those thoughts that person is emanating or, saying, whatever, right? So the moment you start talking, instead of talking about, those set of beliefs, and you start talking about that person themselves, it's like, well, your kids are look at your hair, It's like
Right.
that is the
Yeah.
moment you deviate from that principle. Then you start making it about
Right.
the person instead of the actual principles that needs to be talked about and and addressed. Because it's like, all right, if I believe socialism is the right way and you believe capitalism is the right, not you per se, but just anyone.
Oh yeah, sure.
You believe capitalism is what's going to save humanity, whatever, right? And we're engaging in a struggle on that. We should stick to that, because the moment we deviate into not like ideas or principles is the moment we start becoming unprincipled.
Oh yeah, right.
At that point, it's not it's not conducive to that struggle. And then oftentimes you find that too when you go online, that people tend to don't want to be embarrassed and just want to seem right, even when they know they're wrong. So
Yeah.
a lot of times I just feel like social media, especially more so on timelines, is not the space for that to really go on, even though I think it can happen in some spaces. But a lot of people have pride, and then their emotions get involved, and they start taking it personal, and they feel like, oh, you're trying to call me out, and so kind of like you said, if you are going to do that or try to do that on social media, I would suggest direct messages, and trying to, like you said, be direct with the person as much as you can. Hey, I don't agree with this, blah 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 blah, and then you guys can struggle over that. And that's the way it's supposed to go. And it's the same thing for revolutionary organization or any organization, right? The A-APRP has engaged with this with other organizations beyond closed doors, because we know at the end of the day, us going on social media and posting on our party pages and saying, don't join this organization, is only going to not increase our work, or it's only going to distract us from our work, one, and it's not going to benefit our org, that org, in any way, any capacity, and three, is kind of doing police work, because then you showing the state that, oh, there's a contradiction here, so let's exacerbate that by possibly infiltrating, or obviously just trying to worsen it. So at the end of the day, we're fighting for African unity. So any organization, regardless of ideology or method that they use, we could work with them to be honest. And I think we shouldn't be out here land blasting any organization, whether we don't agree with what their methods or principles are. We should take that struggle behind closed doors and keep it behind there, because once the enemy sees any type of dissension, they're going to try to make it worse and further it in, and that's just going to hinder our progress and our work and our struggle. And it's going to do the same thing for the other orgs. So nobody wins out of that. Nobody wins out of that, for sure.
Right. Yeah, you're not going to get a winning situation if you're just reactionary. And we see also, while you were talking, I thought of all of the programs, and I have not watched any of these programs, but I know them through the memes, like Basketball Wives and Real Housewives, and like all of these like reality TV shows where people are just fighting, just for the purpose of just like making, and it's something that people share, but it's really like you were saying also, it's a lot of emotional stimuli, so, and of course, like Kwame Ture said, capitalism will have you thinking you're thinking when you're just reacting to stimuli. So people are just reacting to the thing that they think is being said. They're not really breaking it down. They're not even processing it really. It's just a matter of being on the stage. And it's kind of like the notion, right? Don't feed the trolls. Don't engage something that is directly meant. And also it brings the internet. The internet was founded on surveillance. So the FBI are on these sites. I mean, the CIA, they are on here. They're definitely paying attention to what is being said, and to confuse the masses. Because again, if we know the objective is to have a united socialist Africa, and we want socialism for the world, then we're going to have to interact with folks that differ. We're going to have to internationalize the struggle too. We can't just think that it's us being oppressed. It ain't just Africans, right? It's all, the system of capitalism is global. So to just think that, a lot of people, I think, as you said, it's not that people are just trying to be off about how they come about things, but people have emotions. They think think they're thinking, just like we're all socialized to think, I know what this is because I read this quote or I read this chapter, But if you're not engaged in that work, you're not going to have and then it's also a collective thing. I'm just not talking about like a book club, but if you're in an organization where you're able to really dissect things and discuss things together and struggle over opinions and ideas, you get to a better place because, we all know that everything has an ideology, and we know that if capitalism is a dominant ideology, then when socialism is talked about, people might think they know what socialism is, but they really don't because they haven't really been, all they know about is that it's bad, or that it's failed or it's not done this or whatever. But they don't know really what can be known about it because the system of capitalism is not direct. All they're saying about it is that it's bad and that people are suffering and all of that. So it just really presses on organizers to understand that folks need to be taught plainly about their situation and in a way that doesn't, because none of us, we're all embarrassed in a way. So it's like, I don't want people to be. It's like, yeah, but I respect people that call things out for what they are. That's some of my favorite people are people who are just who and this is how I try to live my life as well. It's like, I'm not going to be shady. I'm not going to be ambiguous. I'm like, what is this? Like, be clear, be direct so that folks know what you are and what you're talking about. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being abstract, but as a method to get in. But if you're not really talking to the people on their material conditions and it's just platitudes and it's just like, look over here, there's a distraction. Look over there, there's a firewall. It's like, you can't really get through. But I think people even respond to things. I mean, if you dissect like popular music, right, the thing that everyone listens to or the popular book or whatever, because they get it. It's like, it's easy, you want to be digestible so that folks can be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like, that's kind of what happened to me when I joined the party. I remember just watching these videos of Kwame Ture, and just like, he gave that call to action. He's like, okay, you acknowledge the problem. He said, don't just clap for me when you agree with me. He said, that's easy. Clap for me when it's like, let's clap when you work towards the solution. What are you doing to that solution? Like, how are you making that real? Like, the things that are internal respond to the things that are external. So you have to wage that struggle.
Exactly. Yeah, no, you made some really good points, man. And I think this is very relevant in a way or I guess a good example. Have you seen the latest Dr. Umar Johnson interview?
Oh my goodness. I'm glad you mentioned that because I saw only about 2 minutes of it where he was mentioning the school and what he's gotten for the school. I have not seen the whole interview, but I am going to actually get it. So you watched it? Did you suffer?
Yeah, I actually just watched it. So like, I guess
okay.
To bring up is like some of the talking points. I'm not going to spoil the whole thing for you, but you'll get it. I'm gonna kind of give you the gist of what it was about. Me giving this example. So for instance, right, the stuff that Dr. Umar discusses for the most part is a lot of the times in complete opposition to my principles, my ideology, as in Nkrumah Tereus, which is the ideology of the A-APRP. So like for instance, right, like it was drenched with like Islamophobia, homophobia, transphobia, being kind of like biological essentialists.
Yes, that's one thing I did pick up because when he was talking about like the school, he's like, we're gonna have male taught like how to be a man and stuff like that. Like it was very centered. It's nothing about obviously people who don't identify as a man or trans, none of that. It was just very specific I did pick up on that.
Exactly. Yeah. So my struggle with him will always be on those lines, on those principles, those beliefs, those set of thoughts, which, would be his ideology or whatever, right? So I would never if I was, if I knew Dr. Umar personally, or if I didn't, irregardless, I would never be like, well, look at his hair, or, I'm not gonna lie, I'll probably joke around that stuff like with my friends or something, but I wouldn't like in an actual struggle with him one-on-one or, to my, with him or just calling it out publicly. I would never do that. I would never just start talking about his, personal life or, you know, how he looks or whatever the case is. I would keep it solely on this guy is saying some reactionary stuff or trying to, you know, misinform people about what revolutionary Pan-Africanism is, because he kept saying that, you know, I think more recently he's been trying to use that term revolutionary, but nothing is revolutionary about being an Islamophobe, about being homophobic, about being a racist,
right.
Like nothing is nothing is revolutionary about that, and everything.
Right, he's just a status quo. Like, you know, what's interesting about Dr. Umar Johnson is that he is literally giving the same talking points as a white supremacist.
Yeah.
Like when it comes to like being a race essentialist, he just flipped it and made it black African. You know? When it comes to being, you know, like not having an understanding of people who don't just identify as straight, like not having a gender analysis, like none of that. Like he literally just believes a man should be with a woman, and that anybody who is deviating from that are representing some sort of dark consciousness and something being influenced by white people. Like he has no race, class, gender analysis. So when people send me his stuff, it's like, this dude is not saying anything I haven't heard from Joel Osteen or you know, any of the white pastors that I grew up with in church, you know, who would just preach this nonsense. But because they're white and they got money, and Umar Johnson, he got money. He got money, and he got our money. That's the thing. He got African people's money. Exactly. Most people who've donated to him have not been white people, as far as I understand. I mean, unless he got something. See, I don't know what connect. I don't. As far as I know, most of our people love this man. Like I can't tell you how many people send me his stuff, and I'm like, but this. How can you? This because I am going to listen to this interview, but I've watched other interviews, and I'm sure it's not going to deviate from what I've watched before, because he's not giving anything different. He is literally just the status quo, but because but what makes him particularly dangerous, in my opinion, is that he's using Pan-African language. He's saying stuff like Pan-African, like, oh, I'm a Pan-Africanist, but he can't connect that to land. When has he talked about Africa at all in this interview? Is that mentioned?
So he doesn't like I could tell like a lot of stuff, Africa really isn't primary like that. Like he will make references to Africa, but
it's not primary.
It's not primary. And in the context he talks about it, he may, for instance, so one I will dialectical, there's positive and negatives, you know, to everything, and the broken clock is right twice a day, right? So
right.
So he was saying things. So he did mention AFRICOM with Obama, but before that, he said Obama was put in office to make sure to push the LGBTQ agenda.
Oh no, he didn't say that. He didn't say that.
So see, the dialectics of it, it's like he's really just trying to flip the script on the understanding and the principles and the legacy of revolutionary Pan-Africanism, which encompasses the likes of Du Bois, Padmore, Nkrumah, Garvey, so forth and so on. And, you know, it encompasses egalitarianism and humanity, you know, just liberation for all Africans. So the moment you isolate a group of Africans and say they're not worthy or they're not deemed worthy of liberation, that's literally the opposition, the antagonism of revolution. Like that doesn't encompass revolution by any means. So so that's just like one component of that interview. Just like, come on, like he'll make good points, you know, and then back it up with like a really.
That's what I mean. It needs to be consistent. It just can't be one thing. You just can't be cool. You just can't have an analysis that's just race essentialist or like, oh, we just need Africans to be conscious. We need consciousness back in our community. That is not connecting to the overall problem. Like it's just and then to single-handedly call out the LGBT community is ridiculous because it's like that is not the issue. And I think he does that because he knows a large percentage of his followers are hateful towards the LGBT community. And, you know, they just think that they are a distraction and they're the reason why, you know, Black men are being feminized and the feminization of the Black man, all of that nonsense. And it's not backed by any science. It's not backed by any history. It's not backed by anything but hate and ignorance, really, because no one can tell me that any of that is based in any truth. There's no truth for it historically or otherwise, but because folks like him have a platform and he's given a platform. That's what I always criticize when I talk about someone like him and the Nate Tate, what's his name? I don't know.
Andrew Tate?
Andrew Tate, Andrew Tate and Kevin Samuels, like these dudes were given a platform. That's what you need to criticize, the platform. The platform is why they're given that mouthpiece, because there are a lot of people that think like them, but they're given that platform to reflect that and to inspire other people to think that way. And they might, as you said, I always use that quote, a broken clock is right twice a day. But that doesn't mean that that's what we're not actually here now. Like he's not connecting this, and that's an intentional thing. And if someone was to really, and he's not, he might give off the impression of wanting to open the conversation up. And he's kind of like, he'll do the thing like, what's that boy's name? Killer Mike, where he's like, oh, I'll talk to anybody. I'll talk to anybody, It's like, well, yeah, but you're not actually really dealing with the situation. You avoid it, like not really. Again, that's what the whole thing is about being principled, is that you have to be put to the task. You should be able to answer for these things. Like the Breakfast Club is not going to interrogate Umar Johnson about his propositions, because they're, it's like, well, how can we make, because they know, I mean, this video literally is almost at 1 million views, and it was just posted a day ago, 903,000 views. So, and again, most of the people watching this are our people. African people are watching this. And he is seen, and he is being connected to something that is anti-woman, anti-LGBT, anything that is not male specific, African male specific. He don't care about anything about that. He think everybody's being influenced by it, the LGBT community in Hollywood and all this other stuff. But he can't even connect that to the system of oppression and imperialism and how it affects women and marginalized genders. Like,
who got to understand that places like the Breakfast Club and a lot of these places where we think that like, or we may just instinctually, unknowingly believe that, oh, this is like real struggle going on or whatever. It's not really the platform where the struggle goes on. Because these are the most reactionary people. And we also have to understand their class interests too, as well. So they're only going to ask questions about certain things, and they're not really going to have an understanding of how structures work and how they oppress people, or how they function under this capitalist imperialist society, as well. So that's another thing. That we also need to keep in mind when we're watching this. And then another thing too is just like, even with Dr. Umar, he always censors celebrities. Like he talked about, like, we need to hold our celebrities. Like, let's understand, like their class position is never, for the most part, is not going to be for the people. So that should be the big. You shouldn't be expecting the petty bourgeois Africans to be out here on some revolutionary national Africanist.
Yes, exactly.
And if they say that,
they know their role.
Exactly. And if they're using that rhetoric a lot of times just to serve their agenda, which is try to line their pockets, to try to use the aesthetics of it to try to get more money out of Africans or whatever they're trying to do, right? But more so is always, profit driven for the most part, because we live in a capitalist society. So most things that are done is the basis of it is profit driven. So don't look at it as like, oh God,
profit, because the money that he apparently got for this school, like, okay, you think you're gonna stop asking for money now?
Exactly.
Like, I guarantee you, this is just a platform so he can carve out another opportunity to get more profit for something else. Well, we got to expand. I mean, we got it in this one location, but we need to have it I want to have it in every location where Africans are. So like, it's like you say, it's all about expansion. It's all about profit. It's not about the conditions. Yeah. So like, people literally get on to that.
And even when we talk about, principle struggle, we talk about beliefs and principles, but we also talk about structures, because even within structures, they maintain certain principles too. So he rarely brings up structures. Like, he doesn't talk about he doesn't say, capitalism and how it functions, or imperialism and how it functions. He talks about isolated.
Right.
And then like, he'll talk about AFRICOM, or he'll talk about, the petty bourgeois, celebrities are not working on our interests, but don't talk about, it doesn't tie it in with capitalism. So he tries to isolate all these things. And then when people like the 1 million viewers who, may or may not have, be engaging in constant political education, revolutionary political education, within an org or whatever the case is, they may not engage in it. So they interpret it how he's saying it, like, oh, these things are just silos. These things are just happening in, you know, in a vacuum. So, you know, I don't know how this structure is working. So you're just attacking one thing. So this goes into what we're saying about being specific when you talk about structure,
Right.
talk about how they work, be very, because like one thing he was doing too, and we talked about, it's so funny that he said this, because we talked about this in our last work study. He was like, the Asians, and it's like,
oh no.
Asians pretty wide. You talking about China? Are you talking about
Oh
Palestine?
God.
Are
Yeah.
you talking about India?
Specify,
Are you talking
please.
about like,
Right.
what part of Asia are you talking about? Are you saying
Yeah.
all? Like, what I mean, and it's just like a blanket generalization, right? It's
Right.
just like, so you're
Yeah,
telling me
yeah.
all these Asians that, you know, encompass various different nationalities and ethnic groups, they all function the exact same way. They're a homogeneous population, that all their systems, you know what I mean? Like they all practice the same political and economic system. It's like, this is nuts, bro. Like, let's be honest. Like, this is why, and also what my opinion is like, when you talk about specific structures and you're more clear in what you say, it's easier for people to see the contradictions or highlight the contradictions in various things.
Yeah.
As
Right.
well. So,
Yeah.
you know, because when you're
sure.
very ambiguous, you know, and not really direct in what you're saying, then people can miss the mark, or then people could probably initially grasp what you're saying and then come back later. But what about this? Like, you didn't address that, and then you may or may not be able to, you know, handle that or whatever. But when you're clear initially and you're like, hey, this is the structure, this is how it functions, this is, you know, this is the specific groups of people who are doing the oppression, this is how it works, and you're very specific about what you say. You're not like just, you know, pulling things out of thin air or just acting like things are happening in the silos or
using buzzwords.
Talking about, you know, not talking about the root of the problem or talking about causations and not the root. Then it's like, you know, you're not really dealing with the actual problem then. Right? Because like,
you're just talking in riddles, like rainbows. Like, he's just speaking in rainbows most of the time. He's just giving the language because he knows it's red meat to his followers. The people know those. They know when he uses Asians in that general sense, he's speaking to a mindset that a lot of the followers are. Yeah, that's true. That's how they always been. It sort of like prompts them to think that immediately, and that's just what Kwame Ture meant when he was like reacting to stimuli, because that stimuli is inspired by the stuff that they're hearing on TV. Like, he's saying the same thing like Dr. Phil and all of the people that's literally got a platform. That same type of ideology, like, it's the same. And it's like you said, but when you mention the structures, it highlights the contradictions, and then people can't go back and be like, oh, they'll then be forced to reconcile with the fact, or at least see it in their minds that, oh, well, this is connected because historically this happened. And everyone knows you can't divorce historical reality from present reality. If something happened in the past, it's definitely going to influence the future. Like, to say that is not, to say that, oh, it did, if it's a dream, maybe, but if it happened, it's going to directly, if you cut yourself, you're going to bleed. Exactly. You know? So to be ambiguous or to be like, oh, well, maybe if you just, you know, you wrap it for a day if you cut yourself, and then, no, it's still going to bleed. You got to wrap it longer than that. You got to sanitize. You got to do more. It's not just about acknowledging it happened. It's like, okay, I got to do something. If you hit your toe because you have a thing in the door that is hitting, you got to remove that thing in the door. Otherwise, you're going to keep hitting your toe. You know, so like, so you have to take action. You can't just say, well, yeah, this, or if you can even if one is addressing something historically that was racist or whatever, if you're not connecting that to history, or if you're not, because a lot of that whole individualizing thing where it's like, oh, this happened to me, so I mean, this is how they are. It's like, no, that happened to you. And it was unfortunate that happened to you, but to make that the general thing, that doesn't even make sense. That's not even scientific. That's not historic. Because, you know, so like that type of reactionary struggle is or the reactionary situation is what we got to struggle against, because it doesn't help us to just repeat these talking points and to isolate. Because think about all of the people who are LGBT watching these videos. He literally just told them their lives don't matter. Yeah. Like, you don't mean anything to me because you want a man or you want a woman and you should want this. Like, he just directly erased their connection to the struggle overall, because he sees them as the problem, as opposed to understanding the system. And again, we're not even speaking of Umar Johnson or any of these figureheads that are speaking, because it's patriarchy And capitalism and imperialism, these are systems. These are operations. They're not people. They're not just one person who are walking around saying, I'm operating. Like, they're operating in a framework. And once we understand that framework, we can understand the proper, like what we can do about it, why we need to struggle against it, why we need to replace that with egalitarianism and collectivism and socialism and criticism and criticism and criticism. Like, and criticism is calling out things, just like, not being ambiguous, you're just calling it out. And that doesn't have to be offensive. It just could be a question. Like, hey, what did you mean by that? When you walked in, or when you said this, or when I saw this, this sounded like that. Could you explain? Like, that's all. We need to do more of that. Because what happens is, if you don't do that, you think what it might be. You could be wrong. Somebody else might identify with that same thing, and they be like, oh, I think that too. But neither of y'all have talked to the person who y'all think that about. Like, how does that work? So you think this thing, and you told your other friend that thing, and they say, oh, I think that too. Did you talk to that person? No. But you talking amongst yourselves? Like, that's a problem. Exactly. And that's basically what happens online. I mean, it goes to, I guess, the next question, which is like, why is it not okay to degrade other progressive organizations publicly? Because I think when you look into the history of COINTELPRO and the Black Panther Party and what their influence was, and just the matter of taking arguments and making people fight amongst themselves, like, why is that? How does that still happen? Like, obviously, we see the confusion. So,
it's like you said it before earlier. It's that some people think, I mentioned this before when I went to go speak in Oakland. That some people think the FBI, the CIA is like and some one person with a hoodie on and mystified in a dark room somewhere, and it's like, no, they don't operate like that. They're not waiting for one instance to happen, and then they're just a lot of times they're gathering intelligence, they're looking at social media, high-ranking officials with a lot of these social media applications. Like, I think it was even noted, I think Facebook has a lot of people who had high rankings in this imperialist state empire, right? In the government and things of that nature. We're either working for intelligence agencies or working for imperialist institutions like NATO and things of that nature. They have high rankings in Facebook and other social media apps and stuff. So even when we think about like video games and like military games and stuff like Call of Duty or whatever, they also, you have people who worked in the NATO, high rankings and Marines and all these other things.
Who send people on missions to kill like Fidel Castro.
Exactly.
Like, so they clearly to bomb these. But I read that article of the links of all of these high-ranking military NATO officials involved in the gaming industry with these games. So it's happening on all courses.
So for sure, like, not only is it just the state trying to ideologically train us in a way or give us their form of political education, we also have to understand that doesn't happen. They're everywhere. Once again, they're probably on this Zoom call listening. They gather intelligence on the A-APRP, or they maybe listen to other things that we may be doing there. So we understand that. If whatever we say publicly in social media, that they're listening, and as I stated earlier, they're looking to create more dissension, more exacerbate contradictions that may be taking place. So the moment we're pretty much just telling, hey, intelligence agencies, come look, like, we having issues here. And you're like, oh, look, come help to stabilize. When you look in, I've been studying NATO and its functions, and when you look into what they did in Sudan, when you look into what they did in Kosovo, you look into what they did in various places of the world, even currently today in various areas where they're sowing dissension, because unity. I think Nkrumah said, I'm gonna like summarize, like, unity is pretty much it's an imperialist weakness. So they need to find ways on how they can create tribal conflict, religious conflict, etc. So the moment we come out and say we're against this group of people or we're against this organization, they're going to use that because it's a historical precedence of them doing that. They don't want revolution. We need to understand, like, if you don't understand,
right? They don't want that. They don't want to they don't want wealth distribution. They're not trying to share this with nobody. They're trying to continue us. They're trying to give us more crumbs. They're like, how can we lessen the crumb quantity? That's what they're trying to do. They're not trying to give. Yeah. So absolutely no revolution, and that's a wonderful quote. Like unity, they don't want that. They don't want us to get together. Internationalization. Oh no. Exactly. Not for them.
They don't want that at all. So
yet they can be unified. NATO's unified though. You got all these countries.
Yeah, USA, NATO, CIA, FBI, like
right, yeah,
all
institutions, Hollywood, like you got all like Hollywood, another appendage of the government. You know, they have all of these like organizations within their framework organization to do the same thing. So we got to will power against them because they're clearly they're joined together with an objective, and that's to keep us confused. That's to keep us disorganized. That's to keep us reactionary. To keep us responding to the confusion amongst ourselves, amongst the confusion they give us for fun, for leisure, just to have just like we're supposed to be. And I'm not criticizing folks that watch shows like that because I mean it's I like this, you like what you like, of course, television, whatever. But I remember as a child when I would see people arguing and stuff, like I couldn't see myself. Like I knew it was kind of like wrestling. After a while, it's like they're not really fighting. It's, like, it's entertainment. I get it, but like when it comes to how we personally socialize, I think we do need to engage more principally because, as you said, the system is buying off of our reactions. They want us to just like and to fight amongst ourselves and to not, look at what they're doing. And that's what keeps it going. That's what keeps the cycle rolling. And we got to be principled as organizers because the system is even more aware. Yeah, they're definitely listening. It's kind of like whenever Malcolm X would speak, and a lot of other revolutionaries, say greetings, friends and enemies, because they're here too. They're listening. They're amongst us. So we got to be aware of that and be willing to engage in a process that constantly combats that. That's why I talked earlier about criticism, because criticism and self-criticism just gives a space to say, hey, maybe something was said and I didn't understand it, or can you clarify? You're just bringing space for attention to what you don't understand or what you do understand and want correction for. You just don't let it fly. We shouldn't just like be like, oh, if it don't apply, let it fly. It's like, no, because you don't have to be something and still recognize oppression. So while I might not be that, whatever, this is still a problem. It should still be called out as a problem. It shouldn't just be redirected as well, that doesn't really interest me. Like, I'm not a part of that community, so I don't think, but you got family that may be. I don't live out there. Yeah, but when colonialism happened, you got family that could be in these places that Obama bombed. You got family, like we're all over globally. We got people engaged in this struggle, and to think that it only, to individualize it and to say, oh, we're the only ones being attacked, like it's just Black men being attacked, it's just Black women being attacked or whatever you want. It's not just one. We are all being, and there's obviously certain degrees. I'm not denying that, but I'm just saying that we can't, kind of like what Comrade Kalanji says all the time on the Remix Morning Show, like the sidetracking of the slave. Like we do a lot of that sidetracking where it's like, let's focus on this. And it's like, no. Let's really focus on the issue here. We can deal with other things as they come, of course. We should. We always will. But let's not be reactionary. The whole point is to just be principled.
Exactly. Yeah, just like you said, be principled, talk about structures, talk about the ideas or beliefs that people have, and don't reduce it to personal attacks or trying to. If you feel like you're losing a struggle, just take the L and go back, do more research and and just interrogate, because you might just be wrong. Because you don't always come out victorious in the struggle. So you may need to go back and interrogate. Okay, what did this person say? Like, what's let me go to the primary sources, or try to find more reading material on this, and and maybe even ask the person, hey, where are you getting this from? Where is the information coming from? Right. So don't feel like, oh, because I lost this struggle, I feel like I'm losing the struggle, whatever, or I don't feel like I'm talking my points in a coherent manner, that I need to reduce this. So in order for me to win, I gotta like start talking about the person's personal life, or their physical features, or et cetera, et cetera. Because that moment, then you're turning the convo to something else that could lead to something else, and there's something that's just not going to serve either y'all. Because the whole purpose of struggle is to further things forward. Like nothing,
Right.
nothing could go
We're
forward without
advancing.
struggle. Exactly. So you can't advance anything without struggle. So that's the whole purpose of it. It's to further grow ideologically, or even some of your principles, right? So that's the whole point of it.
Right. It's to not just accept that, oh, well, this is just how it is. So, we can't do much about it, but just watch Netflix, eat a burger, and, go, like, no, we can actually advance it scientifically, and yeah, that's the whole point. Like, we want to get better. We want to sharpen our analysis so that we're not just fighting with dull tools, because the system is getting sharper, and we using, rusty blades and trying to, fight this. It's time for us to get even broader in how we reach things, because and I think a lot of times, that's the whole point of revolution and being radical in our analysis, is we're getting to the root, because we're really trying to fundamentally change society. Because society, as it goes now, it's not egalitarian. It's generally just individualistic, and folks are deprived of their dignity. There's not organization amongst the masses. There's dependence on the system to give us information. And so, I will say, though, the youth, and just as is proven historically, the youth is generally the ones in the driving seat anyway, at front of the revolution, being more aware of the system and actually making collective change. And we just got to encourage that more, like more folks joining organizations and being politically educated all the time, that nonstop PE. It's just kind of like working out. It's part of the deal of existing in this life, right? You have a body, you got to move it. Same way with your brain. You got to move your brain in a collective process so that you don't, get what they call that sticky couch syndrome, where you're like, oh, well, I'd rather just chill out, not really deal with that. Like you said, you going out as a sucker, you going out like just someone who just see things go wrong, or are you going out as a revolutionary or reactionary? Like, only two ways to really go about it. You can't really be in the middle. I know that seems easy, but eventually you're going to be pulled on one side or the other. And it's like, why not do it for your people instead of doing it because none of us are happy alone anyway, in our individualized vacuums. I don't know a single person that think they got it together when they know they ain't got it together. But it's easy to give that bluff, to act like, oh no, it's cool. But then that is always contradicted by something that happens in life. It's like, oh, I wish I had this thing. I wish I had, that longing comes from an understanding like, yeah, the system is messed up. I got to do something. I can't just acknowledge it. I got to do something. And the further we all do something, the more we all do something, this capitalism got no other way but to crawl, but to die, and to have to face the strength of the masses. They don't have a proper requiem if we're unified.
Exactly. Well, I guess with that being said, we can conclude this episode. Is there any last words you have before we sign off?
As we always say, join organizations fighting for justice, and you keep committed to this political education process, and go easy on yourselves, and remember that the system and the structure of capitalism is the enemy. So yeah, just back to joining organizations, and thanks for listening to the 91st. We're nearly at 100 episodes already, so
it's just
pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah, it's flying by. Well, yeah, we definitely appreciate y'all joining, and just like Jesse said, join an organization fighting for justice, as well as, back to the main theme of our episode today is engage in principal struggles, don't engage in personal attacks, which is reactionary behavior. And yeah, so before we conclude, just want to highlight, we also have several other podcasts similar to us. So we also have the A-APRP podcast that you should check out. We also have the A-APRP Southwest chapter, who hosts theirs every 2 weeks. We also have Revolutionary African Women, and we also have our ancestors' voices done with our comrades Ajamu and Shakura Umi. So, and also too, we would like to ask you to help support our work or our comrades in Burkina Faso who are trying to build a Pan-Africanist Library Center. So yeah, if you could support that, all these links to the other podcasts will be in the description, and also how to help us support Burkina Books. And also, if you just want to support the A-APRP and also want to look fly and cool and fresh, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. That's the only way to do it, is get our gear from the Fort Ever
Get
shop.
our gear, Fort Ever shop, and tap in that way. So once again, we appreciate y'all for joining. Catch you on the next episode, and Fort Ever.
Or whatever.